I'm holding on just a moment as our secretary hasn't logged in yet, so I'm hoping that we'll see Erin get on before we officially get things rolling.
Yep.
I don't even have to sit on the side today.
Oh, yay. Yes, that's what happens when you're screeching in at the last minute.
What happens when you show up?
Yeah.
I don't want to delay us too long. I don't know if anybody else would be willing to take notes for tonight. See Erin come on here soon.
Didn't even take it with me.
I'd be looking for it over.
Excuse my rudeness. I'm going to call Erin just to make sure that she's, I know she had sent me an email yesterday, but I just want to make sure that she's remembering it's on. And she will catch up. You're doing, okay. So I'll try and keep attendance here on my laptop until she's on. So we're just going to start with a quick roll call to know who's with us this evening. So we'll start with committee members. Erin Chen, Michelle Colvin, Quentin, I think I see you on. And Matt Dolphin's here. Christina Ernstrom.
She's coming in right now. And there she is.
Sorry, bear with me since I'm doing two things at once. Alan is here. Lisa Jackson. Kimberly Lanier, yes.
Here.
Lacey Mendoza. Bob Olson.
Here.
Justin Patterson. Marty's here. Cindy's here. Erin Robinson will be here as soon as she can. She hasn't jumped on yet that I see. Peter Siderius is not able to be with us tonight. Dustin Wolf. Okay. And then for any members of the community, if you can go ahead and type your name in the chat, and hopefully we'll be able to grab that. And I'll just have you say it out loud too, and I'll try and type as you say it.
I think you missed me. I'm here.
And is that Christina?
Yeah.
I do have you.
All right. Perfect.
And this is Bart Ryerson from the board. I'm present also.
Okay. I suppose I should probably add that to my attendance. Okay. Oh, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so we have Veronica. All right, bear with me as I type. Okay, so it's Veronica and Carol from the community. Is there anybody else from the community that we don't have your name in the chat there?
Do you have Steve Wick in there?
I do not yet, so I'll add you. So Steve Wick is what you said?
Yeah, Wick from Yamahalis.
Okay. All right, any other folks that want to check in for tonight?
We also have Steve Harloff from the Friends and Wayne Webke.
All right, thank you.
And Erin Robinson is here now.
Yay.
I will take control. I have that open as well. So thank you, Jill.
All right, thank you. And I will send the attendance to you, but maybe grab what's in the chat in case I missed it.
I actually see, yeah, what you bolded on the current agenda. So thank you so much. I'm going to take over from that.
Awesome. Okay. So we'll go ahead and move forward to the approval of minutes from February. So hopefully everybody had a chance to review those. We're just looking for a motion for approval unless anyone has changes.
I have a slight change.
Okay.
In the section, I guess that'd be section 5, we were asking some questions of Tom, and I had a question. I think you got my first question, which is, are you opposed to trails in general? And then I had a follow-up question for him, which was just to clarify, if we were able to address, or if a trail didn't impact farmers, would you be in favor of that kind of trail? And he answered yes.
All right, so with that change being noted, if we can have an approval of minutes unless there are any other changes.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the minutes have been moved and approved. And then we will jump right into a presentation from Veronica, who is here to share with us more about the Yamhilis West Sider Trail and kind of some of the process that they've gone through, so that hopefully we can learn from that when it comes to our own turn to develop and move forward with trails.
Well, thank you, Jill. I'm happy to be here and have the opportunity to give some history and some context. I'm going to try to do my share screen thing here. So we'll see if that works. Are people seeing that?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And as you saw during the roll call, we do have some other board members here. So if there are questions after this that I can't answer, hopefully one of us can. I do have a lot of information to get through. This has been a 30-year process. So I'm going to try to be as brief as possible, but there is a lot to get through. I think one of the important things to know is that the Yamhilis West Sider Trail is really a grassroots effort from local community members coming together. They saw a need and they also saw an opportunity with an existing right-of-way. And our vision for the Yamhalis West Sider Trail as part of a regional network of trails also mirrors, I think, CPRD's vision for that regional network that connects our Yamhill County communities to each other and then also to the rest of Northwest Oregon. So the vision for our trail itself is a roughly 17-mile path through the heart of Yamhill County that provides a safe transportation and recreation choice, connects our communities, and celebrates the history and culture of our area. So this is a map that shows some of those regional connection potentials. Locally, the trail would connect to Hag Lake, potentially to the new Chehalem Ridge Natural Area, and to the Wapato National Wildlife Refuge. Regionally, it could connect through Forest Grove and the new Council Creek Trail to the Banks Vernonia Trail and to the Salmonberry Trail that eventually will go all the way to the coast. And by the way, that Council Creek Trail in Washington County just received, I think it was a $12.2 million grant from federal infrastructure funds. So that gives you an idea of some of the funding that is available from those federal and state sources. A brief history of our right-of-way and where our name comes from. Yamhalis is from the Native American tribe that originally lived in this area. And West Sider was the name, a colloquial name for the railroad that went through the area. It was on the west side of the Willamette River. And that railroad opened in the 1870s. So it's important to note that the right-of-way has actually been a transportation corridor for more than 150 years. The rail line was abandoned in the 1980s. And shortly thereafter, in 1991, unfortunately, a child died while cycling on Highway 47. And that's when community members really got together and started talking about trying to find a safe alternative. Those meetings and conversations eventually led to the creation of our group, the Friends of the Yamhalis West Sider Trail, in 2012. That year, the trail was also added to the county's transportation system plan by a unanimous county commission vote. And that really opened the doors to being able to get sizable grants and really starting to move forward with trail development. Our organization is a nonprofit that advocates for the development of multi-use trails that support the health, safety, and connectivity of our communities. We're currently an all-volunteer organization run by a board of 8 to 12 local residents who all represent different user groups and different stakeholders. Our role is to educate the public and elected officials about the trail and to create partnerships with entities that share our vision and can help make it happen. We've also made a long-term commitment to fundraising to help with development and trail maintenance costs. Yamhill County was able to purchase about 12.5 miles of right-of-way from Union Pacific Railroad in 2017. And that was funded by an ODOT Transportation Enhancement Grant and Oregon Parks and Recreation, a local government grant. So the section that was purchased goes from Gun Club Road north of McMinnville to just south of Gaston. Approximately 3 miles of the trail as envisioned is in Washington County, and we've also been in conversations with them, hoping that they will purchase and develop that northern section. There are a few privately held parcels, most of them in Carlton. And in Carlton, the private property owners of the right-of-way have granted easements for the trail. There's one near Gaston that might require a workaround, but that's up near the Wapato National Wildlife Refuge. And refuge managers have consistently been really excited about the trail. And so we think that's completely doable. The trail will provide many benefits to our residents and our communities. As we've mentioned, create a safe and convenient transportation and recreation choice, which is especially important on the section between Yamhill and Carlton, because we have a shared school district and kids go back and forth. They go to grade school in Carlton and they go to middle and high school in Yamhill. And right now there's no safe corridor in between those. So it will connect our small rural communities. It can also provide public health benefits. There was actually a study done in Lincoln, Nebraska that showed for every $1 that they spent on trail development and maintenance, they actually realized $3 in public health savings because of the improved health of their community. It will also be good for our local economies as trail users spend money in our communities. And in fact, outdoor recreation is actually one of the key target areas for economic development in Oregon. Safety is really one of the key concerns, of course. And you can see here a quote from the former owner of Tommy's Bicycle Shop in McMinnville about how dangerous West Side Road and Highway 47 are. And I can tell you from personal experience that they are terrifying. And unfortunately, history shows us that they are also deadly. The Yum Hillis West Sider Trail is supported by local communities because they see the public health, safety, and economic opportunities. It's also supported by the tourism industry and, of course, other trail groups in the area. The trail also enjoys strong public support. As you probably know, CPRD commissioned a public opinion poll of Yamhill County residents last summer to see how community members feel about trails and recreation in general and the Yum Hillis West Sider Trail specifically. The study was conducted by Nelson Research, and they are a very experienced and very well-respected research firm in Salem. It showed a strong majority of Yamhill County residents support development of the trail, and that 64% number that initially said they supported the trail grew to almost 70% when people learned more about the trail, and that included hearing messages about some of the concerns that have been raised. However, that study also showed that 52% of people in the county actually had not heard anything about the trail. So the Friends have really been looking at what are some new forms of communication where we can try to reach out to people who haven't been finding the information before. We were asked to address the process for building the trail. This graphic shows a typical process. Of course, sometimes the order of some of these elements can get mixed up for a variety of reasons. One of those sometimes being the availability of grants. And sometimes you just have to be opportunistic and jump on grants when they're available. But note that there is public input throughout the process. In the case of the Yum Hillis West Sider Trail, the county and the Friends provided opportunities for input throughout the feasibility and concept phases of the trail. And the trail was in the master planning process, which would reach out to every adjacent landowner last year when the county stopped work on it. I'd also note that construction funding largely comes from state and federal transportation and recreation funds and can come from other groups like Travel Oregon and Cycle Oregon. Nonprofits like us can get some grant funds that the governmental entities aren't eligible for, and that can fund things like amenities, cultural interpretation, signage, and that sort of thing. The Friends has committed to help fundraise for development and for ongoing maintenance, and also to organize work parties to help with trail clearing and that sort of thing. We've had a couple of those in the past, and they've actually been really fun, and we've had great turnout from the local community. Also, Ken Wright, one of our board members, had committed to the county to fund maintenance for the section between Yamhill and Carlton. And he would be willing to have those conversations again if somebody else ends up developing the trail. So here's a brief history of what has transpired in the last few years. In 2009, the trail was added to the City of Carlton Transportation Plan. In 2012, as I mentioned, it was added to Yamhill County's Transportation System Plan. In 2017, the county purchased that 12.5 miles of right-of-way. And in 2017, a concept plan for the trail was also completed with help from a grant from the National Park Service. And you can find that concept plan on our website. In 2019, ODOT and Oregon Parks and Recreation awarded grants for a bridge project that funded engineering for 3 crossings and paid for construction of the kind of biggest and most complex of those. And that process was almost complete when the county stopped all work on the trail last year. In 2019, ODOT also gave a grant for the master plan for the trail, and the Friends put up the matching money for that grant. That's one of the other things that we try to do to help the process move forward. Master plan was about 2 months into an estimated 9 or 10 month process when that work was stopped as well. In 2019 and 20, the trail was also ensconced in the land use process, and there have been a lot of questions about the LUBA process and the appeals and what was going on there. I'm going to try to summarize a very complicated topic. And please keep in mind that we are not land use attorneys, so we don't have the expertise or authority to give any legal advice about the LUBA process or what has transpired or what might transpire, but we can tell you to the best of our understanding about what's been happening. Our advice for CPRD going forward would be to work with whoever your organization usually works with for land use specialty and have them review those LUBA rulings and explain what they mean and what the process is going forward. But brief history of Oregon land use here. The whole process actually goes back to 1973 when the system was created, and it set up 19 land use goals for Oregon. Protection of farmland is one of those, but there are several others. Providing for recreational needs, diversifying economic development, and providing a safe, convenient, and economic transportation system, including addressing the needs of the transportation disadvantaged. And that can sometimes mean people who can't or don't drive cars. We provided on the packet that I think you received, there's a list of different resources, and we provided a URL there for a guide to land use appeals that Thousand Friends of Oregon has put out that can give you some more background information as well. Land use in Oregon is complicated, and it's not unusual for trails to take years to develop. So the county approved construction of phase 1 of the trail, that section between Carlton and Yamhill, in 2018. A group of farmers appealed that decision, and LUBA issued a remand saying that the county needed a conditional use permit. Now, a remand allows the county or whoever had the land use action to make changes to adhere to the land use law as LUBA is interpreting it. It's important to note that remands do not reverse or cancel a land use action. They simply apply requirements for moving forward. So the county then issued a conditional use permit for the trail, and then that was appealed. And there were a series of rulings from LUBA and appeals. And in each case, LUBA issued a remand. And in those remands, they sided with the county on some issues and they sided with the opponents on some issues. The county responded to the first remands with how they would address the outstanding issues to prevent any impacts to farm practices. The last remand from LUBA was issued on December 30 of 2020. It again ruled for the county on some items and for the opponents on others, and told the county exactly what it would need to address to move forward. The important thing to know here is that LUBA did not kill the trail. In fact, they said the trail is a legal use and gave the county basically a roadmap of what they would need to do to address the outstanding issues, which were mainly around spraying and fencing, as I understood it. The master plan process had started by then and could have answered, if it had been completed, could have answered LUBA's questions. However, that process again was stopped by the county commission in January of 2021 when they decided not to respond to that last remand and to withdraw from the land use process. The land use process is one of those areas where a lot of misinformation has been circulating. Again, it's very complex, so kind of understandable, but since you were presented with an anti-trail brochure at your last meeting, I do need to address some of the key areas where that document got it wrong. One is that there have been accusations that the county staff and our organization were involved in some sort of nefarious backroom dealings. In fact, as we've mentioned a couple of times, the trail was in the county's transportation system plan. And up until last year, the trail had always enjoyed majority support from the county commission. So county staff were working to advance a county goal as had been set out by their leadership. The Friends of the Yamhill Westsider Trail and the county are separate entities. We work to educate the public about the trail and advocate for its development, and we partner with entities who can help make that happen. However, we have no say in legal determinations that were made by the county. Also, just to be clear, our organization is not involved in any way in the recall campaign that's going on right now. Another accusation is that neighbors of the trail were never informed or involved in planning efforts. Actually, beginning in 2012, there were dozens of opportunities for neighbors to participate in the process. These included large public outreach meetings, planning efforts like the concept plan charrette, public hearings, listening sessions, outreach booths at more than 30 community events, and personal conversations between trail proponents and landowners. Invitations for some of these were sent directly to adjacent landowners. Frankly, many declined to participate. Some did participate early on, And some of those people actually supported the trail, and others, while they weren't quite sure or not really happy about it, did support some of the mitigation measures that had been proposed at that time. I addressed this before, so I'll be brief here. LUBA did not kill the trail. If they'd wanted to kill it, they would have issued a reversal. They did not. They issued remands and said they did not find the trail to be illegal. That process, as well as the county negotiations with ODOT on details of their grant agreement, were ongoing when the commission stopped work on the trail. There are numerous trails through agricultural land around Oregon and around the country that don't cause negative impacts to farmers. The farmers do have some legitimate concerns, but proper planning with input from the adjacent landowners, proper regulations, and monitoring by trail managers and maintenance crews can help keep trails safe and prevent issues. There are a number of studies out there about how to successfully develop trails through agricultural areas, and links to those are also included on the resource sheet in your packet. You can also watch the video of our annual meeting on our website. We had a representative from the San Dieguito River Park in Southern California talk about how they've worked with the farmers along their trail to create a successful trail system that actually goes through farmland where they are raising food crops. The next steps for our group center again around beefing up our communications to reach out to that 52% of people in Yamhill County who don't know about the trail. And if the trail is moving forward, the next steps would include completing that master plan. And our understanding is also that a new conditional use permit would need to be applied for and granted. That presents an opportunity to complete the master plan before applying for the conditional use permit and addressing all of the issues that were laid out by LUBA as need to be addressing, and to work really closely with those adjacent landowners to make sure that their concerns are being addressed. We were asked to say how your committee can help in this effort. And I think that depends mostly on your conversations with CPRD leadership and what they want from you and see as your role. From our standpoint, we want to keep this an ongoing conversation and work together as partners to hopefully move this project forward. And that is all. I'm happy to take some questions or have conversation about how we can all work together on this.
Thank you for your time in presenting that for us. It was very educational, and it shows us some of the progress that you guys have made and also some of the opposition that you've had as you've moved forward. And for those of you that are online or in person, I did take all of the materials that Veronica had sent, and right now they're in a folder within our agenda folder that's specific for the Yamhill Westsider Trail. So you're welcome to look in there. She included letters of support and various materials. So at your leisure, you're welcome to look over those as well. But we will open it right now for questions. If anybody has any questions for Veronica or other people that are here from the Friends of the Trail Committee.
This is Kat. If nobody has questions, I'd like to take this opportunity to invite Carol or Veronica to share your opportunity that you're thinking of for staffing in case it might help networking for you.
Yeah, well, we haven't figured out exactly what we're doing with that yet. So there are a couple of things. We are looking for a volunteer who would be interested in helping with communications or even leading our communications effort, as I'm going to be traveling a lot over the next year, COVID willing, and not really able to keep my arms around it the way I have for the last year and a half or so. We also are looking into whether we might be able to hire a project manager to do some of the administrative and outreach work for us. And once we figure out exactly what that's going to do and frankly how we're going to pay for it, there may be a part-time contracting position in that direction as well. And that would be kind of both communications work and other typical nonprofit work like membership and volunteer organizing and that sort of thing.
Okay. Well, definitely once, I know I'd already talked to you about that, but once you guys have that formalized and figured out, feel free to send it to me and I can distribute to our committee in case there might be anyone that could be a good fit for that.
Great.
Okay, well, if there are no questions from anyone in the audience tonight, we'll go ahead and move on to our next agenda item. So at this point, I know I had Casey on the agenda to talk about CPRD current projects and trail plans, but I'm guessing he may not have seen that. The emails didn't go out through the listserv.
Probably not.
So I don't know if you would be prepared to talk about any of that. Otherwise, we can carry that through to the next month's agenda.
Yeah, let's wait.
Okay. Okay, so at this point, we will go on to bylaws. So this is something we hadn't talked about before, but I felt like perhaps there was a need for it. So I did actually, oh, and for those of you that are here from the Yamhilis West Side, you're welcome to continue to join us and listen in. Otherwise, if you have other things to do with your evening, you're welcome to log out, but this is open for anyone to listen to. So I did talk with Brian, who was at our last meeting, who is part of the Bob and Crystal Riley Park advisory group, and he did share their bylaws. So I looked at theirs and then just tried to adapt for our group and make something that would make sense. So I would like to talk this over. I know kind of part of the inspiration for this is with a group of 17 people on our committee. It's a very large group of people. And I think we were starting to get a feeling that attendance was beginning to be an issue. And at this point, we didn't have any expectations set for people on the committee of making sure we're on the same page as far as participation and organization of our group. And I think we've started to flesh some of that out in recent meetings as far as our structure and kind of how we're forming ourselves. So I thought it would be helpful if we set up some draft bylaws that we could give input, change, add, delete, but just kind of a good sense of what we expect of ourselves to hold ourselves accountable. And then also how we can take action moving forward if there's someone that perhaps isn't participating or does not have an interest in being on the committee now that we've gotten things going, if it wasn't what they expected, whatever the case may be, I want to have kind of a sense of how we move forward with that. And my understanding is that we don't need to have a formal quorum for any of our voting. So unless we decide as a group that we want to set an expectation on voting for a certain percentage or number of people on the committee to be participating, that was something that I kept open. So I guess for those of you that have had a chance to look at it, and if you haven't, you may be looking at it as I'm talking. I just want to open it up for conversation and discussion of how we want to set these up and if we want to have bylaws.
I appreciated the mention about participation. I counted 6 people who weren't present tonight when you called the roll. And last time I didn't count, but I got the same sense that, and yeah, I think we ought to spring one.
Okay. So currently, one thing I'm going to be more mindful of is if people are sending me an email or communication of why they can't attend or the fact that they aren't attending, I'm going to start marking them as excused on the agenda, just so we know who's actually in communication, because life happens. I missed several meetings at the beginning of this because of life, so I'm understanding of that. But I think people that are not in communication, we just want to see if there's a pattern of not attending. And so I would like to get a sense of what do we think is reasonable for attendance? What are we expecting from people as far as attendance?
Let's show up or.
So I guess in my mind, do we give a grace period of a certain number of non-attendance with non-communication before we take action?
The bylaw said 2 times.
Yeah. And that's just what I threw out there. So I'm looking
That's fine.
to know if that's reasonable.
A non-communication?
So if people don't show up and they have not emailed me or communicated in some way, that they would not be able to attend.
Okay. Yeah, 2 times I think is fair.
And so I will be more diligent to communicate with Erin so that we can track that between the attendance at the meeting and the communication I've received from people to make sure that we have some good information on that. Are there any other areas that people wanted to have conversation on? I knew that was one that might be a little more subjective that I wanted to address.
About the bylaws in general?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's about the public input. I noted on there that it was 10 minutes limit, but that wasn't honored tonight, and it wasn't honored last month. And number one. Number two, I wonder why we need it, but I defer to you if we do. It could be written, and it could be someone from the engagement committee interacting with the public and presenting it to us in condensed fashion. I thought last month was a waste of time. And tonight, they were preaching to the choir, and so I appreciated it. But I think it distracts us from organizing and moving forward.
and in the bylaws, what I understand that to be is just open public comments, not anything that's on the agenda, which at this point, we haven't put public participation on the agenda beyond if they've communicated with either CPRD or me and asked to be put on the agenda. I would see the 10 minutes that if someone randomly showed up to the meeting and wanted to address something or talk to us about a trail,
Yeah,
because as we get more structured and involved, there could potentially be people that want to come and talk about something we're working on. We're not to that point yet.
So, so I think there's a difference between someone who's on the agenda and just open public comment. Like
Right.
Yeah.
Brian was here last week and he had a couple comments at the end. And so I think that's what we're talking about. I would amend this to say, instead of a time limit of 10 minutes, I would say a time limit to be determined by the chair. So if we have 100 people here on some random meeting, we can set a 2-minute limit. If we've got one person here who's got something special and we've got the opportunity to hear that, we can. You know, are we talking a time limit for each individual? Or are we
Right, I
talking
wasn't
about a
thinking
time limit for
10
a
minutes
whole
per
chunk?
individual. I would think a 10-minute chunk total for open comments, but that's a good question because it does not clarify that.
You know, some numbers sometimes in bylaws are not handled in bylaws, they're handled by either custom, by the chair, or by some sort of other standing rules, so that we don't have to go back and amend our bylaws.
Right. And I do agree that we need to talk about how much we want to involve the public in our agenda items as well. I will say I'm new at this, and so when people approach me with things and it's trail related, I'm like, okay.
I think the board is in charge of politics. Well, we're in charge of nuts and bolts.
Right, and I will say with the last meeting, all I knew was that he was someone that wanted to talk about the Gila Trail, so I did not have an impression of what tone or what message he had. He didn't give me materials.
Okay, that's behind us.
But going forward,
Further to the point, the
some way
board is
that I
in
can
charge of
manage.
politics.
And yeah, I
We're
will
not.
say when people approach me, I don't always know if it's a political conversation they want to have. So for me as the chair, I want to be able to have some guidelines of how would you like
Well,
me to filter?
One solution is to have someone from the engagement committee go talk to them. And have the person from the engagement committee say, okay, I went and talked to this guy who wants to talk to us. And
So they do a screening.
in 3 minutes, they tell us what the members from the public said.
What do we think of that idea? Do we want the engagement committee to do a screening before any public or community topic would be added to the agenda?
See,
Or are there other ideas?
Well, I don't know, I think we need to consider it. Some of us are clearly of different opinions about how open our advisory board should be. Personally, I would prefer to hear all angles because we can't make a sound judgment on what we're advising unless we hear both the pluses and the minuses. And yeah, there's politics, but anything out in public is politics. This is political whether we want it to be or not. And so I don't know that, getting rid of dissenting voices is just as a principle in our society is a good idea. It's better to let everything see the light of day so we can all make sound judgments. And at the end of the day, we'll make our sound judgments after hearing everything.
And I think potentially down the road, if we have fuller agendas with time-sensitive things that we need to make decisions and action plans on, then we'll be more careful of what outside sources we have taking time. But at this point, I feel like, yes, we have things to talk about at each meeting, but not so much that we can't also hear some things going on in the community regarding trails that could end up giving us information on things that we need to do going forward, that, foreseeing what type of opposition there might be or what rumblings there are in the community about trails in general can sometimes be helpful as we look forward in developing and planning. But I do agree, we want to be mindful and respectful of what time we're using of all of you on the committee and make sure that we're addressing things that are pertinent to what our purpose and our mission is.
The Amherst Trail could go on forever and take up all of our time. It's really contentious.
Right, and I'm not
And-
looking to add
and-
further things on our
and-
agenda for that. I think we've heard both sides.
The board has been sort of neutral on it, as far as I know. I love it. I'm in favor of it. They're preaching to the choir tonight. But we haven't talked anything tonight about what I understood the board priority to be, and that's the bypass trail.
Right, which we have to put that off to the next meeting because that was information Casey has. So we're going to talk about bylaws. We can talk about our priorities, but I don't know if we can really set our priorities until we know what the CPRD priorities are. So we might get through bylaws and then
Okay,
not have as long of a meeting tonight.
yeah, so the bylaw thing, the public input,
So I've changed that to say a time limit of 10 minutes total, not per person,
okay?
or at the discretion
Yeah,
of,
that hadn't happened last month or this month, and so moving
And-
forward.
yeah, we didn't have this until right now. That's where we're creating it.
Okay,
So any further comments as far as public participation that is not structured into the agenda?
I believe Quentin has his hand raised.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see that, Quentin.
You're good. Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Awesome. Just a question for Kat, not trying to put her on the spot, but I remember we had discussions about public meeting law. Where does public comment fit into that specifically?
Yeah, we looked into that, and actually, you do not fall under the same public meetings laws as our meetings with elected officials, since you're an advisory committee. And you are not appointed as elected officials are appointed. You are appointed differently. So you are not subjected to those, so you can do your own thing. You can invite public comment or not public comment. If you do, then we need to record it, at least in note form, not verbatim. But you have real leeway.
And you say, when you say we checked into that, who is that specifically?
Me and my lawyer, our legal counsel.
And that was going to be a question I had as well, as far as bylaws. Does this need to be reviewed by the lawyer for CPRD to make sure it falls under anything that's approvable, or is this something that the committee?
These are just your committee guidelines you've decided to run your committee by. So no, if you would like me to take it there, we can look at doing that, but I don't think that needs to.
I'm not looking to add more steps than what's necessary. I just want to make sure we're doing due diligence, that whatever's needed is taken care of. Okay. And I have been trying to email out the agenda the week prior to the meeting. So on here, I put the formal agenda items must be submitted to me 3 working days prior. So that gives some leeway. I mean, yes, I'd prefer it further in advance, but at that time that I send out the reminder the week prior with the agenda, I would look for a pretty quick turnaround if someone wanted to make changes or additions to it, so that we could prepare any materials and have all of it ready for the meeting. So I did include that. And then I also wanted to ask the minimum of 10 regular meetings. Yes, right now we are expecting to have monthly meetings, but if there is a month where we don't have anything on the agenda, I don't want to waste people's time. So hopefully we have things that we can move forward and projects to work on. I don't know if we want to have a minimum set meetings per year, or if we just want to be flexible with that as we move forward.
I guess my question there, because you commented about, should we do everyone meeting or committee meetings every, so it's like maybe 10 everyone meetings a year?
I would be looking at full committee. And I think part of the reason I put that in there, I'm part of the Dundee Parks Committee. And I'm honestly a little frustrated that we don't meet more regularly. We aren't moving things forward. We aren't progressing with projects. So I want to hold us accountable to a certain point to actually be taking action and making progress. But I want to be reasonable too, that if we have all the subcommittee meetings, how often do we actually want to meet as a full committee outside of that as well? So, Erin?
I was just gonna say, could we do that as a percentage, maybe 80% instead of a number? Because, or something like that. I was just thinking maybe that would be more.
So 80% of total meetings, is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, because if we skip a few here and there, because we don't have an agenda, then 10 wouldn't make sense. But if it were a percentage of the meetings actually held.
So that's considering our subgroups? Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah.
My only thought is that might be a little hard to track unless each subgroup is reporting to me of when they're meeting, and then we do a calculation based on that. Maybe I'm thinking it's more complicated than it is, but.
Well, I think you could have it in the bylaws, and then there's a, it's maybe not strictly enforced anyway, but if it then gives you a reason to remove people who aren't participating, of like, to bring it to the chair's attention of like, we're kind of at this stage where, and 80% may be a high number, but I'm just saying some percentage instead of a number.
Right, and with this, I wasn't thinking participation, but just scheduling as a committee of how often we meet.
Okay.
I don't know if we're on the same page.
Yeah,
Did you have
I think we
something?
are. No. So Erin, just to clarify, we have established that we're looking at if someone has more than 2 absences without prior notice, that it would be grounds for removal. What we're talking about now is total number of meetings, a minimum number of meetings that we would have per year as a group. And
Oh,
setting
to
a
be
minimum.
held. Yeah, and actually, I don't know if I guess on that issue, I think that that is hard to say because I don't know if we want a minimum.
Yeah.
Although Jill, you're right. I mean, you're in a committee where you don't have enough. Or where you're feeling like you wish you had more. I don't know. Anyone else have an opinion?
Why not leave it at once a month, and if you cancel, you cancel. There's nothing to talk about. But
Well, it's setting a minimum. That's why. I don't know that we need to set a minimum.
Yeah,
I think we just adjust with the times, and if this becomes a problem, someone can make a motion to amend the bylaws.
Sounds good. So I'll
anyone's in
update
favor
that
of
to
that.
not have the minimum, but it will still say when our meetings are scheduled, a public announcement of the meetings by CPRD. I'll keep all that, but just take out the minimum.
Okay.
And then the other number that was in there is having a minimum number of members that remain in the group. So if we have lots of issues with non-attendance and we're cutting people out, what is the minimum number that we need to actually be successful as a group? So I'd put 7, just because that's what the other group put. So I don't have a magic number. We had 17 to start. I feel like we don't necessarily need 17 to be effective because we've been moving forward without 17. But do we have a number that we want to hold to that at a point, if we get below that, that we recruit for more? Yes.
Well, I think when you're talking about minimums, the problem that you get into, it's like with the minimum number of meetings, you can back yourself as a group into a corner because you've established these bylaws. And let's say half the group at this point leaves and you're down to 6. Well, you can't amend this because you don't have enough members. You have to wait to find someone. And so, I think the lower the number, the better. I mean, there should be a minimum of probably 3 at a minimum, but 3 or 5, the smaller the number, the better, so that you're not backed into a corner where you can't make adjustments.
And yet we don't need a specific number to vote on anything. So
Right.
we don't have a quorum set.
Right.
I just want to know, like, if we get to a certain number, at what point do we work with CPRD and say, we need to open the application up again? We don't have enough people to be successful and move forward.
5 is a quorum and 5 is a minimum.
Well, there's 3 committees, subcommittees, so you want at least 2 people on each subcommittee.
6.
And 7's a pretty number, I like odd numbers.
Yeah, and yet truly, if we have 3 subgroups,
That's 7. I think we're
two to 3 people, it could be 9 if you like odd numbers.
What's the mechanism for getting new people? Just ask the board?
Well, probably how it started, that we would have an application and promotion that there are openings on the advisory group. Is that how it would work, Kat?
I'm sorry, would you say that again?
That if we got to a certain amount where we had people dropping like flies, and we're down to, 6 or 9 people on our committee, in order to instate more people onto the group, would it just be reaching out to CPRD? You would promote that an application is open for new members in the group?
Well, not necessarily. What I would do is, you would make a request to the board. I mean, it would be appropriate if a representative would go approach the board and say, this is what has happened, and our membership has decreased, and we would like to increase it. How would you like us to proceed? And they will decide whether or not we open it up again, because it would be CPRD opening it up again, or whether the board might just give you the authority to go ahead and appoint anybody who you might have in mind already.
Okay. And are there any rules about people participating that are outside of the CPRD?
There aren't rules. Generally, we start with, we do limit it to district residents. However, the pickleball committee, they did have a couple of out-of-district people apply. And so they took that to the board, and the board made the decision to say you could have up to 2, in that case, 2 representatives from outside the district to bring that in. So again, that would be at their discretion, but it's not exclusive.
The application included a position for people outside the district as well. So,
Right.
for this.
Be careful what you wish for.
Okay.
Bart has his hand up.
Yes, Bart?
Yeah, I wanted to say that with our board meetings, there are months that we skip, like typically Thanksgiving. And if there's additional information that we need to talk about, it's pretty easy to schedule another special meeting as long as it's noticed. And with you guys, it might be another Wednesday in the month other than the first or second. And as far as the board members, I think when we were originally setting up this advisory committee, the recommendation from staff at first was to limit it to 7. But we had such a strong group of candidates, we decided to appoint everybody. And as Kat mentioned, if you get to the point where you feel like you're short a few members, just come to the board and make a recommendation. And I think we'd be happy to work with you guys. That's it.
Thank you.
As far as membership outside of the district, what if the opponents of the Ann Hillis Trail want to be committee members. Yeah. I think make it in district. Period. What's the point of having someone from out of district?
I mean, one point of having people from out of district, if we have someone who is an expert on grant writing or an expert on planning and development, there could be some areas of experience and expertise that we could draw in from other areas that could help with specific subgroups and elements of our advisory group that maybe aren't specifically local interest-based, but outside experience and expertise that we could draw on that could be helpful.
And they could be a visiting consultant.
To answer your question, why involve people from outside the district? Well, for one, we're looking potentially adding a trail outside of the district onto our trail plan. The analogy would be, imagine, that Portland decides they want to put an airport right through the middle of your house, but no one here in Newburgh can vote on that, or have any voice in that. That wouldn't fly. And so, again, dissenting voices are not an obstacle necessarily. They are there to help us to find the right plans that work for the entire community. Not, if we left it up to only people that are 100% for the trail or any trail system, then we end up with a worse trail system or no trail system. We need to hear dissenting voices so we can make sound decisions. It's very important. They're our partners.
And it's the opportunity to work through those hard points that allows you to move forward in a stronger way than if you pretend those oppositions aren't there. And again, not saying that someone that is out of the district is going to be opposition either. But I do think that we want to have some limits on how many out of district. I mean, in the end, again, I don't know who approves who is on the committee. It sounds like there's some flexibility that if it's someone that we as a committee feels is going to be a good fit and an asset to our group, that we can present that to the board and get approval for that. And otherwise, in other sources, it may be sending an application out to the community in general. So it sounds like we have some control over who we approve and who gets added. So I don't know if there needs to be any sort of a guideline or limit on that, if that's just adding more words than we need. Again, this is a framework that I got from a different group and just trying to massage in what works for us, what feels good, what doesn't.
With the 7 people, that's what we were getting agreed on as the minimum. If they vote to approve a new member, then okay, with that.
Okay, so keep it to the 7 members.
Mm-hmm.
So taking out the limits on members that reside outside of the district.
The board of 7 can agree who gets admitted or not.
Yeah, up to discretion.
I'll think of how to word that later, because I do not have that in my brain at the moment. Okay, were there any other pain points or areas that we want to add?
I have one to potentially add. Have we thought about what our process is for actually having discussions and for making decisions? I know that we are, make a motion, sometimes we get a second, sometimes we have discussion, sometimes we vote. I think there's a balancing line between making things super formal and saying, we will follow Robert's Rules of Order to the T, versus everybody, it's just a free-for-all, and then the loudest voice, or the one who talks the most, which sometimes is me, gets their say, and no one else does. And so some sort of process for discussion is really important, again, so that minority dissenting viewpoints or different ideas get a voice. And it's not always the big mouth. Sorry.
And I will say right now, I'll be totally transparent with things that are coming up. I don't always know what's an actionable item that we need to make a motion on, or what is something that we need to make a hard and fast decision on. So part of that absolutely goes on me, that we're having discussion about all sorts of things, but what are we actually needing to make a final concrete decision to move forward on? So I might need a little help pointing those things out as we're going too.
One solution to that is that anything that's actually a substantive, I'll try that a different day, decision, that it comes to us in some sort of written format so that we can all see it in advance, bat it around maybe even before the meeting a little bit as individuals.
That frames the issue, but Robert's rules is tried and true.
Yeah, but it's also very structured, to do it properly, you need a full-time parliamentarian because it's like 300 pages long.
Yeah,
But yeah.
it's, I move and you
I
get a
move,
second.
yeah, I second, I amend, and then, But I just don't know if that's, I like that this is an informal group and we can have discussions, but. So I'll zip it and everyone else can talk.
You still have to have a mechanism for establishing a majority consensus.
Yeah.
I do like the idea of if it is a serious thing that we need to make a vote on, that we have information ahead of time to review. Because I know it can be hard when we're continuing discussions and continuing talking to also look at materials and try and make a decision and sound judgment can be hard sometimes. So having things to review ahead of time helps. Or, I mean, some things are not going to be as intricate to know little details that we could make a decision on the fly. And that could even be something that you guys could bring up, that if you feel that you need more time to think on something before we move forward with a motion, I welcome people to voice that. Because I won't always know. I'm new at this and figuring it out, but I do welcome you guys to approach me if there's something that comes up as a motion and you don't feel like you have all the information you need or that you need additional details to review before making a choice. I want us to be able to openly have a conversation about that and that everybody can feel comfortable vocalizing that. Any discussion or further conversation on how we can structure voting and making motions on things?
I think potentially just looking at some basic Robert's rules and saying that we need a call for a motion or to amend a motion or to table discussion, and then a call for a vote at that point. I feel like those are probably the three primary mechanisms that we would need to worry about. I don't think we need to end. I don't think we need a vote to end debate or to adjourn or any of those things. But I think, to table something, to move a motion on a vote, or to amend a vote or amend a motion, I feel like those three in particular would probably be beneficial to our organization.
Yes.
I move that we include a section for a process of decision-making and running the order of our meetings in an orderly, effective, efficient manner.
Okay.
And I'll second that. Second?
All right. All in favor?
All right,
Any opposed?
you didn't mention Roberts.
Any volunteers to
Nope,
write up
just
that
the system.
section into our bylaws?
I volunteer.
All right.
Or I move that I volunteer, I guess.
We've got a winner. Okay.
Could you state the motion one more time that was approved?
My motion was that we include a section in our bylaws for addressing our decision-making process and keeping our meetings orderly, effective, and efficient.
Were there any other conversation points? I did create just a little bit of structure on the time frame because I will say I missed the first few. I don't know if it was ever determined how long our meetings should be. So when I'm trying to look at an agenda and plan and assess how long it might be, I feel like this time frame is way too long, 6 to 8:30. So I don't know hour and a half tops would be a goal for meetings. What do we feel is reasonable?
That seems reasonable.
Okay, 6 to 7:30 would be the maximum timeframe for a meeting, would be our goal.
Yep.
If it's less than that, perfect. But I think that gives us a target of what to keep the meetings within.
As long as public input is 10 minutes.
Well, and honestly, I don't think, unless we
10
get
seconds.
further down the road with trails, I don't think we're gonna have a lot of people coming from the public just to generally share things outside of our agenda
They're
items.
not gonna quit coming.
It could also, and this might be something when you look at the potential rules around meeting structure, you could also have it to where public comment is available prior to a vote rather than at the beginning of each meeting, and provide the vote in writing in the agenda, or the proposed motion in the agenda prior to a vote. That could be a potential to limit the time necessary for public comment in each meeting.
So in meetings where we're planning to make a vote on something, that we open for public comment?
Correct, because you generally wouldn't vote on something unless it is on the agenda, if I'm not mistaken.
That would make sense.
We're not the board.
Yeah.
Right. Sorry, should be recognized.
Go ahead.
Could I make a motion that we call for volunteers to take a closer look at this set of bylaws and see if we're missing anything and come up with some additional wording? So a motion to form a mini committee and an ad hoc advisory
Project
to the
group.
advisor, yeah, whatever we're gonna call it. So, yeah, a motion to create a subgroup to take a closer look at our bylaws and then call for volunteers to help with that subgroup.
Would you, our chair? Yeah.
It's gonna be a very short-term thing.
It's a
just
short-term,
about-
1 month thing.
And I obviously will be on it because I have to know how to run the meetings if we're making rules for it. Is there anybody else that wants to be involved in a little project group just for determining our
That's a
bylaws?
motion we should need a second.
Oh, I second.
Jill Bart has his hand up.
Okay.
Bart, go ahead.
Thanks. This is a very civil group and you guys are really good about not trying to talk over each other, but as long as I think the one thing with the parliamentary process that really helps meetings from getting out of control is for people attending the meeting to request acknowledgement from the chair before speaking. Otherwise, it's really easy to get out of hand. But somebody, I think Casey mentioned before, and Kat did this time that I had my hand up. So to encourage people to be able to wait for recognition from the chair before speaking, it's probably, I don't know if there's a better way to make that visible for people remote to talk, but people in the room should, try to signal the chair and wait to be recognized before. It makes the meetings run a lot smoother if you can do that.
Any other comments or discussion? This just Matt and I are the, that are gonna be
We had a
working forward
seconded
on.
motion, so we should
Oh,
vote.
I seconded it.
Yep, so we should vote, right?
Oh, yes. So all in favor of Matt and I working together on bylaws? Me. Any opposed? Any opposed? Okay. So as I said, I think we need to table the priorities discussion because I don't feel like we can effectively move forward with that until we hear from CPRD on what their current priorities and projects are and get a lay of the land with that. So unless there is, oh, go ahead, Quentin.
Yeah, just a suggestion perhaps. I don't know if the planning group is ready to meet, but perhaps by our next full meeting, they could meet to discuss a bullet point list of potential project ideas that could come back to the full group for discussion, and perhaps we could move, maybe I think that you said you were going to try and move the discussion on the current projects and the update on the current bypass trail to next meeting. So maybe we could, at this next full committee meeting, have something ready for the full CPRD board to consider as far as our projects of interest per se.
And that actually leads into a great question. Have all of the subgroups had an opportunity to connect between the last meeting and today?
The planning, we have not, I don't think,
I know the engagement group has.
There's a general email.
Right, just email connection, not that anyone was expected to meet in person between then and now, but just to make sure that you guys have some communication going. So if you haven't done that, and if any of our chairs are in the group, make sure that you do just kind of rally the troops and connect by email.
and that, so as somebody, sorry, that just goes into the spreadsheet to the finding out who's interested in what committee, and then sending an email to those folks.
Yes, so if you go into our folder and then it's within the first folder that you get to that has the members, and within that spreadsheet, most people have filled in which committee they want to be a part of. Those that haven't are probably ones that have not attended. But you should be able to get a good rundown. And if it's easier, I can add those into the committee resources document, because that's where I have all of our emails. So if the listserv isn't working for any reason in the future, know that you can go in and just copy and paste that whole email list from the committee resource index that is in the main folder within Google Drive. So if it's easier, I can just break down the subgroups and put them in there too, so that it's easier to grab.
Another question from here. Quentin, so what were you asking for the planning committee to do? To prioritize the trails of interest, but we haven't had a presentation yet about those, right? Or have we?
I think I was just considering, like, I know that we have ideas internally, perhaps that group can bring forth that list to the full committee, and then knowing that we will see other presentations from Casey and maybe other CPRD staff, we'll have a full list that we could potentially discuss for either next meeting or future vote to recommend it to the CPRD board as something that we pursue, one of those or multiple of those or whatever. So I guess more of internal ideas, getting those into a list that we can all see.
Yeah, I think, we haven't met us, obviously, the planning subcommittee folks, but I think the thing that we need to discuss first is these kind of tools that we talked about last time about, what are our priorities for trails? There's been some lists thrown around, like Pete Sid sent out the list of, like, are there heritage or, ecologic things that the trail connects, or is it part of maybe like a master plan, a regional plan? So like a kind of bullet point checklist of the things that we as a group prioritize in trails, and then running each one of these trail ideas kind of through that. Is that what I'm understanding right? How we're going to proceed? So I think the first thing we need to do as a planning group would be to say, how are we going to like look at each trail under all these objective criteria? So we have to come up with the objective criteria. And I think we could maybe present that to you all at the next one as the first step. I guess, I don't know, we'll talk about it, but I'm not sure we'll be able to give you a prioritized list of trails. Maybe after Casey presents, we maybe could.
That makes sense to me. Because I do think a part of what we had talked about a few times is just kind of figuring out the framework of what is the process that we run an idea through. Mm-hmm. So if someone has an idea, what are the steps we need to take? What is the funnel that we put it through to carry it forward? And I don't know that we've fleshed out what all of those steps are.
I think we could maybe hopefully present that, at least on our planning side.
Well,
yes.
Do you want a formal motion for that?
No, I'm just gonna do it.
Just gonna do it.
There goes
Robert's Rules of Order right there.
Right? It was kind of it was a Lucy Roberts, wasn't it? You all can work on bylaws.
It's
but-
Robbie's rules
Yeah,
of
it's
order.
Robbie's rules, bro.
This side of the room. is
That's how I
loose.
like to run
This
it.
side of the room, you guys can help.
Yeah, y'all can flush it out in
Yeah.
bylaws.
Quentin, do you think that would accomplish at least some forward movement and planning?
Yeah, I just think, I think Alan may have pointed it out a little bit, is that we might want to move along now that we've kind of taken our due diligence. I think we definitely need to do that. But perhaps at least get, maybe it's just the bypass trail. We all accept that that's going to be our test project perhaps, and try and get that, if the board comes back and says that's what we want to do first, and then, we can have background processes, but I think we need to have something that we can start working on here pretty soon.
I think that's a very fair statement. Marty?
My memory is from the board meeting that I attended a while back was that they wanted us to, give them feedback on the Yamhalis Trail this spring. And it's pretty close to this spring. So yeah, of course, the bypass trail I think is our priority, but I think we do need to pay some attention to this Yamhalis West Sider Trail in the coming meetings.
I don't think that it needs to be a comprehensive, complete list. A simple list with the ones we just talked about, Yamhalis, the Abbey Crabtree Trail, the trail idea that you brought forward, the Newburgh Dundee, and then the Heritage Trail Plan has a list of like 75 to 100 miles worth of trail projects. And so I think if your group listed those trails on a sheet and started to look at that plan, I think that's a good place to start.
Okay, yeah.
And then if you can come up with criteria, or at least a draft of that, that's a great start.
Okay.
So those two things.
Sounds good.
Okay. Are there any other conversation points? We had a pretty slim agenda, so if there's any other conversation points that we can cover quick, and otherwise we could adjourn.
I hope quick. I think the engagement group might want to start looking at what it needs to do to actually engage people. We don't have a specific topic to engage with people yet. We're not ready to actually do it, but we need to start thinking of how we're going to go about that. And so it would be great to have a meeting for that. And I think fundraising, it would be good to have a meeting so you can start to look at what are some potential funding sources. I mean, I think we've got an idea roughly of the big high priorities maybe. We're not nailed down on any one in particular, but if you can just start to get the lay of the land for what funding sources are out there.
Which I will mention, if any of you have not dove into our Google Drive, I did start creating index documents in each of those subgroup folders. So for funding resources, you'll see there's a list of funding sources and opportunities, and I've started to add some things to that just from various trail emails that I get and presentations that we've received. So feel free to add to that, delete from it if it doesn't work. But that is one thing I'd like for us to have in each of those subgroups, is to have kind of an index of resources. I want to make it easy for all of us to get in and get the information we need. So make sure that you're utilizing that. I think the only one I haven't done that yet was planning, because we didn't have much in there yet. But definitely on the funding side, I've added that, and I'll add them to the other ones. This month has been a bit busy and short, so I didn't get to all of those since the last meeting. But just like we have that index in the main Google Drive for the committee resources, I do want to have a resource index for all of those subgroups to make it easy to jump to things that we need to find. Any further comments, questions? Oh, Quentin?
Yeah, speaking of funding subgroup, if anyone's interested in joining me, you're welcome to that point. I will go ahead. I have an Excel spreadsheet from high school when we did grants and grant writing, and I'll just modify that to be exclusively trails, but it would list the application deadlines, the anticipated award deadlines, the criteria and stuff like that. So I will make a personal action item, unless anyone else wants to join me in the funding committee, to have that updated for our next full committee meeting.
And I will support you in sending out an email to the entire committee, reminding people to get in and update. I didn't realize you were the only one on that subgroup, so.
I'll hang out with Quentin for an hour or so. I don't know what I can contribute, but I'll hang out.
All right, well, in the interest of time and you all enjoying your evening, unless there's anything further, we can go ahead and adjourn. I will say, if you have any ideas or things that you would like to add to the agenda for our next meeting, there's some things that I have tabled to carry over, but we don't have a lot at this point. So feel free to keep feeding me information.
Amen.
All right, thank you all for your time and for being here tonight.
Good night, everybody.
Night.